After I automated half the department, they fired me for making myself redundant, then hired 2 people to replace my code. I let them drown in missed deadlines until I triggered the kill switch and watched their biggest contract go up in flames. The email came in at 2:17 p.m. Subject line: Urgent, system failure, all operations down. I read it 3 times before I smiled. For months, I'd been watching them scramble, sending late-night Slack messages, asking clueless questions about the system I built, pretending they understood automation when they couldn't even read the logs. And now the day had come. The redundant employee had just pulled the plug. It all started 6 months ago. I was a data engineer for a logistics firm in Columbus, Ohio, a mid-size company doing big work for a national retail chain. When I joined, everything was manual, repetitive, slow, inefficient. I built scripts to clean data, automate reports, and even schedule internal tasks. In 6 months, I'd cut the workload in half. Everyone seemed thrilled at first. But then came that meeting. My manager, Tom, with his fake smile and a new haircut he clearly thought made him look like a director. HR sitting beside him, already nervous. The sentence burned itself into my brain. You've done such a great job optimizing things, you've made yourself kind of redundant. Just like that, fired for doing my job too well, they let me finish the week. I spent those last few days quietly cleaning up my workspace, saying my goodbyes, smiling like it didn't sting. What they didn't realize was that my automation framework, the thing they were now totally dependent on, wasn't some off-the-shelf solution. It was mine, every line of code, every hidden layer, every safety trigger only I knew about. After I left, I heard through friends that they hired 2 new data analysts to take over my system. Neither of them had any engineering experience. Within weeks, deadlines started slipping. Reports were wrong, orders mismatched, and then came the real test. They called me one afternoon, desperate for help as a consultant. I played dumb, told them I was busy. That's when Tom's tone changed, from polite to defensive to panicked. They were circling the drain, and I hadn't even touched the kill switch yet. The system I'd built had a backdoor, something I'd told no one about. It wasn't malicious. It was a fail-safe, a deadman switch designed to disable all automation if certain admin credentials were removed or tampered with. A way to prevent data corruption if someone unqualified messed with the structure. Guess what the new guys did the first week they started? They deleted my credentials. That's when the clock started. 6 months later, when their biggest retail client expected a flawless quarterly report that never came, I knew the timer had run out. The failsafe activated, quietly shutting everything down. The scripts stopped. The pipelines froze. The automated servers went silent. And while their system burned, my phone started buzzing. Tom, HR, even the new CTO they'd hired after me. I ignored every call until finally, around midnight, I got one last email. We're desperate. Please help us restore it. We'll compensate you fairly. I stared at that line for a long time. Compensate me fairly. They had no idea what fair looked like anymore. I opened my laptop, pulled up the encrypted terminal, and hovered over the command that would give them their precious system back, if I wanted to. But instead, I typed something else. Something that would end it all for good. Then I hit enter. Everything went black. I didn't start out as some cold-blooded coder plotting revenge. I used to believe in loyalty, in earning your place through hard work and innovation. When I joined Westbridge Logistics, I was just excited to finally be doing meaningful work. My last job had been soul-crushing, endless spreadsheets, micromanaging bosses, and no chance to grow. So when Westbridge hired me as a data automation specialist, it felt like a second chance. Tom, my manager, seemed cool at first. Mid-40s, friendly, liked to say things like, "We're a family here." He'd walk around with his coffee mug, pat people on the back, act like the company dad. But the moment you challenged him, even gently, his whole demeanor would change. He wanted control, not competence. Still, I kept my head down. I started small, automating daily report generation. Then I built a scheduling script to handle warehouse logistics. Then predictive analytics to optimize shipping times. By the 3rd month, our entire operations team was running smoother than ever. The CEO even mentioned me in a meeting. Who's responsible for the uptick in efficiency? Tom took credit, of course, said it was his team's synergy. I didn't care much. I just liked seeing my work make an impact. Until the day Tom asked me to make the automation more flexible. I didn't realize what he meant until I dug deeper. He wanted me to build it so someone without technical knowledge could manage it. Basically, he wanted me to make myself replaceable. I should have seen it coming. But back then, I was naive enough to think that making things easy was part of the job. So I built a simple dashboard, added quick commands, and even documented the system with user-friendly notes. A month later, HR called me into a restructuring meeting. Tom was there. He looked uncomfortable but not surprised. HR handed me a paper. They were streamlining technical roles. My position was being absorbed into data operations. I asked if I'd done something wrong. Tom said, "You've done a great job. The problem is you've optimized yourself out of the process." That sentence hit like a punch. When I walked out of that room, I wasn't angry yet, just numb. But later, I learned from a coworker that Tom had already hired replacements before I was even told. 2 data analysts, his buddies from a previous company. They were both completely unqualified. That's when anger replaced numbness. I realized I hadn't been streamlined. I'd been used. They didn't even delete my credentials right away. For a few weeks, my name stayed on everything. My code was still running. My systems were still doing the heavy lifting. And when I saw that, a thought crept in, one that I couldn't shake. What if they had to actually understand what I built? So I made a small change. Hidden deep in the automation core, I inserted a logic gate, a timer linked to my admin account. It wouldn't destroy anything, just deactivate everything if my credentials were ever removed. The system would still exist, but lifeless, unresponsive, silent. A perfect mirror of how they'd treated me. I didn't expect to ever use it. But then I heard what happened after I left. Tom had bragged to the department that he'd streamlined operations by replacing me with 2 cheaper employees. He even presented my automation results as if they were ongoing proof of his management success. And when the new hires deleted my credentials thinking they were cleaning up the user list, the countdown began. 6 months, then darkness. But what happened in those 6 months made it even better. Because while the code ticked down toward chaos, the cracks began to show, and Tom started to panic in ways that made me realize just how fragile his little empire was. After I left, I thought I'd forget about Westbridge. Get another job, move on, start fresh. But I couldn't stop checking in on them, little glimpses through LinkedIn updates, Slack screenshots a friend would send me, whispers from old coworkers still there. At first, everything looked fine. The system I built was still running perfectly. My automation logs still populating daily summaries, reports still reaching clients on time. But then, around the 2nd month, the little hiccups began. One of the analysts, Marcus, accidentally changed a few configuration files while trying to update the data schema. The system auto-reverted, but it caused a 2-hour data freeze. Another time, their client portal started showing outdated shipment statuses because someone disabled a nightly job that synced with the live database. I saw all this because the alerts still came to my personal email. They'd forgotten to change the notification settings. Every time one of those alerts hit my inbox, I'd sit there with my coffee, reading them like small victories. Then I got a message from Laura, a QA engineer I'd been friendly with. She told me Tom was losing his mind. The execs were on him about declining performance consistency, and he kept blaming legacy code, meaning my code. He was trying to rewrite parts of it to simplify the workflow. But since he didn't understand the architecture, he just kept breaking things. One time, she said, he stayed in the office till 3 a.m. trying to fix a bug that was literally just a missing comma in a JSON config. By month 4, the cracks had turned into craters. Deliveries were late. Data was mismatched. Their biggest client, a national retail chain, started complaining about errors in their analytics dashboard. That dashboard had been my baby. It worked flawlessly when I managed it. Laura told me Tom had called in consultants to audit the system. They spent 3 weeks trying to reverse engineer what I built. They couldn't make sense of it because my code wasn't just automation, it was layered logic. Each component depended on my admin hash as a trust key. Without it, parts of the framework slowly shut down, like a body losing oxygen. Then came the moment that told me karma was finally circling back. Laura forwarded me a company-wide message. Due to recent technical challenges, all automation reports will be delayed this quarter. Manual processing will be required temporarily. Manual. They had gone full circle, right back to doing everything by hand. The irony was almost poetic. Around that time, Tom reached out to me directly. He called it a friendly check-in, said he was proud of how far the team had come and wanted to see how I was doing. I could hear the strain in his voice. After some small talk, he got to the point. "Hey, random question," he said. "Do you happen to remember if there were any, dependencies linked to your old admin account? We've been having some weird issues since it was deactivated." I nearly laughed out loud. I told him I couldn't recall, that I'd left everything documented in the internal wiki. He pretended to thank me and hung up fast. After that, the updates became grim. Their manual fix approach started bleeding money. Employees were quitting. Clients were asking questions. The last update I got before the shutdown came from Laura again. "Tom's been throwing chairs in meetings. They said if next quarter's report isn't delivered, they're losing the contract. He's blaming everyone. He's losing it." I remember staring at that message for a long time, my heart pounding, not out of guilt, but anticipation. Because I knew something they didn't. The countdown was almost done. 3 days before the system went dark, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line just said, "I know what you did." For a second, my stomach dropped. I thought someone had found the fail-safe. Maybe one of the consultants had pieced it together, or Tom had finally realized the pattern. I opened it carefully. It wasn't from Tom. It was from Laura. The email wasn't long. "They're blaming me for everything. Tom found the internal logs and saw your old alerts were still going to your personal email. He thinks I was helping you sabotage the system. You need to fix this, or I'm going to tell them everything." I read it twice, feeling something twist in my chest. Laura had been one of the few people who actually treated me decently there. She'd vented to me about Tom's lies, told me how much the place had gone downhill after I left. I thought she understood. But apparently, self-preservation beats loyalty. I wrote back immediately. "There's nothing to fix. The system is doing what it's supposed to do. I didn't sabotage anything." She replied 5 minutes later. "Tom is going to HR. He wants to contact legal. If you don't help them bring it back up, they're going to report you." I sat there, staring at that message, realizing what was happening. They were going to turn this whole disaster around and make me the scapegoat. Tom must have figured it out. The dependencies, the hidden logic, maybe even the trigger tied to my account. He probably didn't know the details, but he knew just enough to spin a story. And Laura, she wasn't trying to protect me anymore. She was trying to save herself. That night, she called. I could hear panic in her voice. "Tom told the CEO you planted malicious code," she said. "They're talking about legal action. He said he has proof." "Proof?" I asked. "What proof?" Apparently, Tom had found an archived message I sent him a year earlier, when I first suggested building a self-protection mechanism into the automation in case of data corruption. He twisted that into intentional sabotage. He was using my own transparency against me. That was when the anger turned sharp again, cutting through everything else. They'd fired me for doing my job too well. They'd replaced me with incompetent people. They'd let the whole company rot from the inside, and now they were accusing me of destroying it. I almost considered stepping in. For a second, I thought maybe I should help Laura, just to save her job. But then she said something that killed that thought instantly. She told me Tom was working on a proposal to rebuild the automation from scratch, and that he planned to take my original code and claim it as a legacy contribution of his. The company was even considering promoting him once he stabilized the transition. So after all the lies, all the credit theft, all the backstabbing, Tom was still trying to cash in on my work. And now, he was framing me as the villain. That was the moment I decided to stop watching and start acting. The fail-safe timer was at its final stage. It had about 72 hours left before it shut everything down completely. But I realized something chilling. I could do worse than let it quietly deactivate. I could make it loud. So I logged in through the back door one last time. I watched the system logs update in real time, the automation slowly dying as dependencies unraveled. And while I was in there, I planted something small. A message, not malicious code, just text. When the system crashed, every automated task and process in their internal console would freeze, displaying the same line on screen. You made efficiency your enemy. I closed the terminal, locked it, and walked away. Let them spin their lies. Let them panic and call lawyers. In 3 days, they'd know exactly who held the real power all along. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to ruin people for sport. Revenge, for me, felt like a surgical correction, slow, precise, and necessary. After Laura's email and Tom's faint-of-heart threats, the plan hardened into something practical. Not because I loved the idea of watching them burn, but because they'd already burned me. I wanted them to feel the same hollow, humiliating cold I'd felt when HR handed me that paper. First rule, don't be obvious. If they suspected me, they'd circle up, call lawyers, and scrub everything. My advantage was how invisible I'd been. Everyone loved the results and ignored the person who made them possible. I'd use that invisibility like a scalpel. No flashy malware, no ransom notes, no public threats. Just the truth, delivered in a way that hurt their pride, pocketbook, and reputations. I made a list, no technical steps, just people and vulnerabilities. The new hires were raw and panicked. Tom was brittle and prideful. The execs were numbers, first and terrified of losing that retail contract. That contract was my target because when a cash crop goes bad, everyone notices. Destroy the sales narrative, and Tom's veneer would crumble faster than HR could draft non-disclosure clauses. I spent nights mapping the social angles. Which execs would freak out? Who had the most to lose if numbers slipped? Who would quickly point fingers? Laura had already tried to save herself. That told me where alliances lived and died. I reached out to a handful of old allies, not to recruit them into sabotage, but to plant subtle seeds. A forwarded screenshot here, an offhand remark there. I let them see the cracks I wanted them to see without making it look like I was orchestrating anything. People are terrible at resisting confirmation bias. All I had to do was give them a nudge. Second rule, preserve plausible deniability. If anyone asked, I'd be some bitter ex with bravado and nothing more. No direct contact, no traceable advisories, nothing that could be tied to me in court. That meant being patient and letting their incompetence do the heavy lifting. I kept my distance, except for a few anonymous messages that looked like internal alerts. Those messages weren't commands. They were breadcrumbs that would make managers second-guess the new team and hand control back to people like Tom, people who were spectacularly bad at actual work. Third rule, don't break what you can make them lose on their own. I'd thought about nuking databases, about vendetta-level sabotage. But the more I considered it, the less satisfaction I found in total destruction. I wanted humiliation, not criminal ruin. I wanted them to realize how dependent they'd become on a person they'd dismissed. I wanted calls at 3 in the morning. I wanted to watch Tom scramble his way toward excuses and lies until the executives no longer believed him. So I refined the trigger. The fail-safe I'd embedded was enough to stop automation and force manual handling. That would bleed time and money. But to make it undeniable, I also slid in a non-destructive signature, a small, human line that would appear across their consoles and reports when the system died. Not code that threatened data, just a signature that named the act for what it was, a removal of complacency. If they tried to spin it as an attack, their own system would spell the truth out for them. There was one other thing that mattered more than the mechanics, my own conscience. I kept asking myself if I'd crossed a line. Every petty revenge fantasy I'd allowed in the weeks after the firing had to be weighed against the person I wanted to be. In the end, I decided that exposing their incompetence, forcing them to explain missed deliveries, to face a lost contract, to rehire people who could actually do the work, was a kind of justice that didn't require me to become monstrous. So I waited. I watched their errors widen into crisis. I watched Tom lie in meetings and sweat in hallways. I kept my phone off during the day and only checked messages at night, like a physician on call. 72 hours. The timer ticked down. I'd been nursing that anger at Laura like it was a hot brand. Her, "I know what you did," email had opened a wound I kept picking at. For 3 weeks I replayed it in my head, her panic, her phone calls, the way she begged me to fix this. I told myself she'd folded the moment Tom put heat on her. I wrote her off as another coward. I let that story feed my plan. Then, 2 hours after the system went dark and the company-wide consoles filled with that little line I'd left, "You made efficiency your enemy." I got a message from Laura. Not an email, not a plea. A folder. A compressed archive with a single note attached. Play this at the board meeting. Inside were screenshots, internal chats, draft invoices, and a stack of CSVs that didn't add up. Numbers Tom had been presenting as savings were being siphoned into a ghost vendor. There were messages where Tom congratulated someone at an outside contractor for taking care of the migration, and an invoice trail that led to an LLC registered under his wife's middle name. There were even emails where he quietly suggested they slow-roll fixes to keep bonuses up until after the quarter. My stomach dropped. I'd expected incompetence, not criminal intent. I'd expected credit theft and corporate hubris. I hadn't expected embezzlement hidden behind my dashboards. Then the real twist landed with the force of a freight truck. The "I know what you did" email, the one that had fractured any sympathy I had left for Laura, had been her contrivance. She'd sent it to me deliberately. She'd been collecting everything on Tom for months. At first, she pretended to be a scared, self-preserving cog, because that made Tom trust her. He bragged to her, he slipped. He saved messages on her Slack channel thinking it was a private vent. She copied and archived everything. She'd told HR what she had, but HR did nothing, too much blood in the water and too many fingers pointing in different directions. So she needed a way to force the company to actually look for something other than convenient scapegoats. She needed a spectacle. I had to make them panic, she told me in the chat. I had to push until somebody lit the match. That explanation should have made me hate her less. Instead, it made my head swim. The plan she'd executed was reckless. Her fake betrayal had scorched me. She'd gambled with my reputation so she could hand the board proof that Tom had been cooking the books. She'd expected me to react. She needed my failsafe to be loud and unignorable so the board couldn't chalk it up to server issues. She needed the system to point to a human decision, a signature, so the execs would dig into the logs instead of issuing a press release and firing the redundant ex-employee. The audacity of it thrilled me. It also pissed me off more than anything else. She'd used me as bait. She'd used my anger to pry open a door she couldn't peer through alone. But the folder she'd sent changed everything. The board didn't just investigate, they called their legal counsel. They froze accounts tied to the ghost vendor, and they demanded an emergency audit. Tom couldn't stall anymore. The logs tied him in knots. His explanations unraveled when matched against the invoices Laura had quietly forwarded to the client, and to a curious junior exec who loved the game of catching cheaters. That night, as Tom paced the empty office while lawyers cross-examined him over video call, I realized two more things. One, Laura's betrayal had been a calculated moral choice, not cowardice. Two, I'd been manipulated into becoming the very evidence she needed, and I'd gone along with it without realizing. So I sat with that, the petty revenge I'd engineered and the larger, darker truth Laura had unveiled. Both were true at once. Both were ugly. And as the company's emergency lights flickered and messages flooded in from clients asking for explanations, I felt one more twist slide into place. Something I hadn't planned for and couldn't have anticipated. But it wasn't good for Tom. Not at all. When the audit reports hit my inbox a week later, leaked of course, the truth wasn't just ugly. It was surgical. Calculated, almost beautiful in how cruel it was. Tom hadn't just been stealing money. He'd been stealing time. See, while I was building the automation, I always thought he was impatient because he didn't understand the technical side. He'd rush projects, cut corners, act like bugs didn't matter. What I didn't realize back then was that every time he approved a delay or told me to push this task off to next sprint, he was redirecting the billable hours to a fake consulting firm he and his wife had registered under the name Blue Lake Data Solutions. He'd been quietly billing the company for contractor hours that didn't exist, fake work that supported my automation process. My system was producing the results, but on paper, the improvements were being credited to Blue Lake. That meant every success I created fattened his fake firm's numbers, padding his resume and bank account simultaneously. When HR fired me, it wasn't about streamlining or redundancy. It was a preemptive move. Tom had started worrying that the more efficient my system got, the easier it would be to see that Blue Lake wasn't doing anything. He needed to remove the one person who could spot the pattern, me. Laura had stumbled onto it by accident. She was in QA reviewing invoices when she noticed the contractor hours didn't match the workflow logs. She went to HR. They brushed her off. She went to Tom. He told her to stop wasting time on admin mistakes. That's when he started isolating her, removing her from key meetings, cutting her project access, moving her seat to a corner of the open floor. A quiet punishment. But instead of backing off, she started collecting proof. And when I was fired, she realized I was the missing piece. She knew I'd built everything from scratch. She knew if the system ever broke down loudly, the execs would finally be forced to dig deeper. That's why she sent that email. That's why she baited me into detonating the fail-safe. But Tom's reason for everything, for stealing, manipulating, and framing people, went beyond greed. When the audit team questioned him, he didn't even deny the shell company. He told them flatly that it was compensation. He said, "The company owed me. They wanted my leadership, but they paid me like a middle manager. I just took what I deserved." He said it calmly, like it was some kind of business philosophy. Then he smirked at the lawyers on the video call and said, "Besides, it's not theft if you're the one running the show." That line chilled everyone. And the worst part, he wasn't entirely wrong about how the system worked. Westbridge's executives had been bleeding people dry for years, promoting talkers over doers, burning out staff, exploiting loyalty. Tom was just the mutation their greed created. A man who learned the rules too well and used them like weapons. He didn't embezzle out of desperation. He did it because he could, because he understood the company would rather scapegoat a quiet engineer than look in the mirror. That was the why that stuck with me, the moral vacuum, the way his voice didn't shake when he said, "You made me this way." Laura was right, they wouldn't have believed her without noise. They needed an explosion, and that's what I gave them. But it wasn't over. Because once the board suspended Tom and locked down Blue Lake's accounts, they started calling me. The same people who'd let me go, the same ones who'd ignored every warning. They wanted me to come back, to help rebuild, to stabilize operations. They were offering money, real money. I could have said yes. I could have been the hero who saved the company from the mess I'd helped reveal. But instead, I wrote one final message. I stared at their offer for almost an hour. 6 figures, full benefits, remote work, Director of Automation Engineering. The same title Tom had stolen when he threw me under the bus. The irony was almost poetic. They'd fired me for being redundant, and now they were begging me to resurrect the system that had exposed their rot. I opened a blank email. No anger, no rant. Just calm precision, the same tone I used when I wrote documentation they never read. "Appreciate the offer, but I'm not available for contract work. You didn't lose a system, you lost your integrity. Good luck rebuilding both." Then I hit send. After that, I deleted every backup of the old code I had, not out of spite, but closure. That framework had been built out of naive faith, the kind that believed hard work would protect you. I wasn't that person anymore. Word spread fast after the audit. Tom was fired, of course. His wife's LLC got investigated. HR claimed ignorance. The CEO released a vague statement about restructuring due to integrity concerns. Westbridge's biggest client pulled out within weeks. Without that contract, the company shrank by half before the quarter ended. Laura called me once just to say thank you. She'd been offered Tom's job, but she turned it down. Said she was done working for people who punish competence. We didn't talk about what she'd done, how she'd manipulated me, how she'd used my anger. I didn't need to. We both understood the trade, her risk for my revenge. I found another job 2 months later at a smaller tech startup in Pittsburgh. Different vibe, transparent, honest. I built their automation system too, but this time I documented everything, gave everyone access, made sure no single person could control it, not even me. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Tom's line, "It's not theft if you're the one running the show." That's what power does to small men. They start thinking ownership equals entitlement. That every idea, every effort, every ounce of sweat beneath them is something they're owed. But when I watched Westbridge collapse, contracts canceled, servers idle, executives pointing fingers, it hit me. Tom hadn't been running the show. He'd just been another cog in a machine built to eat people like me alive. The difference was, I learned how to step out of it. And the best revenge I could have imagined wasn't the crash, or the message I left, or the panic in their calls. It was knowing that every future meeting, every new hire, every attempt to automate operations would carry my ghost. They'd try to rebuild, but every line of code, every script, every process would whisper the same reminder. Don't make your best people redundant. They might just prove how necessary they really are. When I shut my laptop that night, I didn't feel triumphant, just still. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. They'd built a system of exploitation. I'd automated accountability. And in the end, that's the one thing they couldn't delete. R.